cooler heads will prevail and that the two sides will stand down.
Lieberman says even if no one wants a war, Israel has the right to defend itself. Ariane Arianpour at the Iranian community of Manitoba says members of the community worry about family and friends still living in Iran. He says the regime must be stopped if there's ever going to be peace in the Middle East. A new study has found in 2021 opioid use was behind a quarter of all deaths among Canadians in their 20s. Researchers from the University of Toronto say in particular of note was a five-fold raise in fatal overdoses in Manitoba. The number nearly tripled in Saskatchewan and more than doubled in Alberta. The study's out today in the Canadian Medical Association Journal. You can hear more about it coming up on World Report at 7. The West End's Filipino community near Sargent Park tennis courts are celebrating a big win. A City of Winnipeg committee recently voted not to renew the lease of the nonprofit that ran them for 10 years. Jerry Laforteza is part of the group who pushed to get the tennis courts back in the city's control.
It's going to be challenging for us. We make sure, but I think we're up to it. So we have to prove the city didn't make a mistake, decision about us. And then, like I said, it's going to be challenging.
Laforteza says people have already volunteered to do the cleaning and maintenance for the court, part of why the previous manager charged $10 a visit. People in the area say those fees and limited hours were a barrier to playing. Laforteza also hopes the city's decision will encourage players from across Winnipeg to get into tennis. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, let's get into what's happening in our forecast. Abby Adeyemi is in. This is our regional forecast, looking around the province outside of Winnipeg as well. Hi there.
Good morning once again. Winnipeg is starting clear. We're at 3 degrees, but the clouds will definitely be coming in later, and we will see a southeast wind accompany that. We'll get a high of 16 today, and I call it more like a warm day, but tomorrow we're expecting showers. Now, heading to Brandon. Brandon is currently at 6 degrees, and it's mostly cloudy over there. We'll see mainly that cloudy conditions stay with folks in Brandon, and then a chance of showers. You will notice this morning. Wind becoming southeast, and you'll be heading to a high of 16. For the north, I talked about that statement we had, the statement we had earlier about the rain starting Tuesday morning, turning into snow by Wednesday across the northern parts of the province. Now, you should be expecting about 30 to 50 millimeters of total rain and snow over 3 days. Now, Lynn Lake and Thompson would be seeing snow, and then areas like the Par and Norway Isles will be seeing more rain. Currently, Thompson is at 0, and we're seeing some mist there. It's cloudy with fog patches, which will be dissipating this morning. Then you'll see some clearing during the afternoon period. We are heading for a high of 9 in Thompson today. Now, further north in Churchill, it's currently minus 7, and we're seeing freezing fog. Today will be sunny, and then you see a high of 0. Dauphin is currently at minus 1, partly cloudy, and then we'll see a chance of showers later this morning, and wind will be coming from the southeast, heading to a high of 13. In Gimli, it's currently minus 1. Steinbach is also at minus 1. It's clear over there. Those regions will be heading to a high of 10 and 11 respectively. Now, for Steinbach and Morris, Steinbach is at 0 and Morris is at 4.
So after all that, because you're busy in traffic in weather today, here's what I have for traffic. Nothing. Actually, I do have one thing. You just got to watch for the street sweepers out there. Hooray! They're cleaning up all that dust.
Yeah, true. And you know the next phase I always look forward to after the street sweepers? The markings.
Oh, the line painters.
The line painters.
Right? Yeah. Putting the marks in the road. I love that too.
Then I know summer is fully here.
I don't know why. There's something about when you're driving behind them and you're just going to go zzz, 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 shooting down the paint. Like, yeah, it's kind of addicting to watch. It's hypnotic.
Have you watched them drop the cones when they're about to start? It's like those guys are just calculated the gaps, the distance.
You know what we should do?
And they just sit behind it,
like
and you see him sitting, facing coming traffic, and it's like, drop. drop.
Yeah. It's like a
drop.
synchronized
like
dance.
It's so sync.
We should totally get some music and do some videos with street workers this year.
True.
I'm writing that
I would
down.
wanna do
That'd be a
that.
fun idea. That'd be a fun idea if they'd allow us to do it. So if you're one of those workers out there, call us. Maybe you want to be the stars of our cheesy little idea here. Let's get to business news now. Crystal Ramlakan joins us via Zoom. Hi, good Monday morning.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
Let's start with housing. The budget comes out tomorrow. The feds have been making a string of housing announcements leading up to this, but also, of course, in an effort to address the real concerns, supply, affordability. But you have data about what people are facing in terms of pricing, right?
Yeah, that's right. So the Canadian Real Estate Association is expecting the national average home price to climb 4.9% on an annual basis, to just over $710,000. So that's more than double the hike it had predicted at the start of the year. So in its updated outlook, CREA now expects about 492,000 homes to trade hands this year. That's a 10.5% increase from last year. And the association says, well, high interest rates could keep people on the sidelines. If the central bank does cut interest rates, well, that of course could entice people. And plus, we've seen record population growth, which could also add to demand. Now, so far this year, the number of home sales in March rose 1.7% compared to a year ago, and the average price was almost $699,000. And that's up 2% compared to last year. And CREA says it is seeing signs of a potential boom. It says showings were up at 25% week over week at the start of April.
Now, ahead of the federal budget tomorrow, Royal Bank of Canada has issued, I understand, a warning. What have they said?
Yes, well, RBC says Canada is at greater risk of losing its AAA credit rating than other top-rated countries if the government fails to show fiscal discipline. So an economist with the bank says a downgrade has the potential to raise the borrowing costs across the economy. And Canada is one of a handful of countries that has the highest credit rating from both S&P Global Ratings and Moody's Investors Service. And the country has a relatively low level of net government debt, but our households are highly leveraged, partly because of high housing costs. And a softer economy and increasing expenses are expected to weigh on the balance sheet of the upcoming budget. Now, the threat of higher costs is already a reality for some provincial governments. A budget shortfall and growing borrowing needs in British Columbia saw S&P cut that province's credit rating to AA last week, its third downgrade in 3 years.
Finally, before we look at the markets, robots are coming to Walmart.
Yes. So the retailer says that they are coming to 2 Ontario warehouses in Mississauga and Cornwall over the next 5 years. But the company says jobs are not at risk. So the company says robots at a Calgary warehouse shave down the time it takes to get products from trailers into the facility by 90%. And of course, it's not hard to see why companies are enamored with robots. They don't complain about tasks. And while they aren't subject to union or government policies restricting work hours or the weight that they can carry. But they do have some time for, downtime for upgrades, maintenance, and recharging. But of course, there's no need to offer them overtime vacations or benefits. Now, they do boost safety, though, by reducing repetitive strain and injuries. However, though, experts have been warning about robots putting jobs at risk for a long time. Statistics Canada estimated by 2020, almost 11% of Canadian workers were at high risk of seeing robots transform their jobs or even replace them. And the risk was even higher for those over 55 without post-secondary credentials or with low literacy. But Walmart maintains the technology is not eliminating the need for workers. When it announced its plans to build its Calgary distribution center in 2022, the facility said it would actually create 325 new jobs. Now, the company says it needs humans for oversight and safety. Walmart says it wants its employees to actually focus on problem solving and critical thinking to run a good, safe supply chain. And StatsCan found firms that invested in robots between 1996 and 2017 actually employed more, not fewer workers.
Interesting data there. What's going on in the markets then, Crystalie?
Well, markets are higher amid heightened geopolitical tensions following Iran's attack on Israel over the weekend in Europe. So Germany is up, the UK is down, France is up. In Asia, markets are falling. Shanghai is up, Hong Kong is down, and Japan is up. So the oil is down 67 cents to 84.98 US per barrel. Gold is up $1.70 to $2,375.80 US per ounce. And the dollar is up almost 0.2 cents to 72.78 cents US.
All right. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.
Okay, thanks, Marcy.
By Zoom, Crystalie Ramlakan joins us daily for our business news. Well, next on the show, one of the largest concert series is underway, with headliners like Lana Del Rey and Doja Cat taking the main stage. The Coachella Music Festival in California happens over 2 weekends, and the first one just wrapped up yesterday. People heading to the show have a lot of planning to do, and according to Google, one of the most popular searches this year related to Coachella had to do with hearing protection. Now, when we talk about hearing protection in Manitoba, yes, we talk about concert series, but we also talk about the Jets games. And this weekend, when the Jets had that shutout, 7-0, I'm sure it was roaring in your house if you were watching it. If you're watching the games in person, though, we often do recordings at Canada Life Centre, and you've probably heard us do stories in the past talking about how it's one of the loudest environments to be in. So whether it's music or sports that's your thing, CBC's Blair Sanderson has a look this morning at the next generation of earplugs.
Even without the music, major concert events like Coachella can be extremely loud.
Good evening.
When Harry Styles performed at Coachella a couple of years ago, the screams were deafening. And not just figuratively. Research has shown that rock concerts can reach up to 130 decibels, which even over a short period of time can pose a risk to people's hearing.
Well, I have had a ringing in my ears since the 80s.
James White was diagnosed with tinnitus when he was just 18 years old, following several years of performing and practicing in a rock band.
Heavy guitars. I standing right next to the drummer, splashing a cymbal right next to my ears. I'd lay down at night and I would hear a high-pitched squeal that would keep me up at night.
Can you hear it now?
I hear it right now, yes.
In order to prevent the damage from getting any worse, White now wears earplugs whenever he performs or attends a concert. He also happens to be a reviewer of consumer products with more than 1 million followers online, and he recently tested out some of the latest earplugs on the market.
And so here's the Vibes on the right and the Eargasm on the left. They look pretty different.
These higher-end earplugs are often size adjustable and claim to lower the volume of what you're hearing without muffling or distorting the sound like cheaper foam or silicone plugs.
I can definitely tell you there's a difference you hear in frequencies between the cheap earplugs and the more expensive ones. The cheap ones kill a lot of the mid-range and the high frequencies, while the Eargasms and the Vibes let more of those go through.
A difference indeed, but ultimately White says even the old-fashioned plugs still work pretty well. And if they're all you've got, they're worth using to protect your hearing. But if you're a person who goes to a lot of concerts and want the best sound quality, custom earplugs are also an option.
So we insert the little piece of foam using something called a pen light way down around the second bend in your ear canal.
Maxine Landry is a clinical audiologist who says business is quietly booming.
Do people come here wanting earplugs for concerts?
They absolutely do. Definitely. We even have patients that have come in and purchased multiple pairs to use as they're doing different activities.
And they're made differently depending on what that activity is. For example, the noise filter on plugs made for concerts target different frequencies compared to those designed for people who ride motorcycles or work on construction sites. And Landry says the implications from loud noises even go beyond hearing loss. There's new research that shows hearing damage can lead to other health problems, including dementia.
So now that people know this, they're becoming much more proactive in trying to preserve their hearing.
You mean if I start losing my hearing, it can cause other long-term health complications?
Absolutely.
Any idea how that works? How do I get dementia because I lost my hearing?
Because your brain isn't being stimulated properly.
It's a message Landry says more people should listen to. Because if you choose to go to a show like a Harry Styles concert without protection, you might just find your hearing is not the same as it was. For CBC Radio, I'm Blair Sanderson.
So the loudest thing I was ever at that I needed ear protection at was not a concert, was not a sporting event in an arena. Are you talking to the radio? Can you guess what it is? I was at an F1 race in Montreal. Wow. Wow. And yes, I had ear protection. There are a number of things to consider, by the way, when buying earplugs, but experts all agree a proper fit is the big key to good protection from any loud noises.
Narrative, lyric, heroic, romantic, verse, or prose. The 2024 CBC Poetry Prize is on. Send in your best unpublished poem or poetry collection. Up for grabs, cash prizes from the Canada Council for the Arts, a 2-week writing residency at the Banff Centre for Arts and Creativity, and your work published on CBC Books. Contest closes June 1st. For rules and more, go to cbcbooks.ca.
It's 10 to 7 this morning. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for joining us on Information Radio here on CBC on the 89.3 FM, on 990 AM as well. Also on the app and on YouTube this morning. So thanks so much if you're watching this morning with us. It's 3 degrees. Partly cloudy, winds are southwest at 4 right now, and we're heading for a high of 16 with increasing cloud this morning. Well, next on the show at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights today in Winnipeg, people will gather for the second annual symposium on homelessness and poverty. City councillors and MLAs will listen to presentations from those with lived experience, like the organizer, Alwi, as well as advocates and organizations that all work across the community. And it is a community that has also been touched, of course, by the ongoing opioid crisis. There's new research out today that provides a stark picture of that. Opioid-related deaths across the country doubled between 2019 and 2021. More than 1 in 4 deaths among young adults aged 22 to 39 in Canada were opioid-related in 2021. Now, that report is out today in the Canadian Medical Association Journal, or CMAJ. Tara Gomes is senior author of the new research. She's also scientific director at Unity Health Toronto. Good morning.
Good morning.
So tell me what your goal was with the study when you started to undertake this research.
We've known for quite some time that opioid-related deaths and other harms have been climbing across Canada. I unfortunately don't think that would be a surprise to most people. But one of the things that we have seen change in more recent years is this increasing concentration or clustering of these deaths in our younger populations, in people in their 20s and in their 30s. And so what we wanted to do in this work was really try and better reflect the impact and the burden of that early loss of life that is occurring from these preventable deaths across the country.
How did you actually undertake the research? How did you study this?
So Public Health Agency of Canada does report, they work with coroners across the country to report opioid-related deaths across Canada overall, as well as in different provinces and territories, to try and help reflect what is changing year to year with this crisis that's happening. What we were able to do is use that data and look at, for example, the age at which people are dying. And what you can do with that is look at people's life expectancy at death and see how many years of life they lost because of that early death. So you imagine somebody in their 30s might have a life expectancy into their late 70s or early 80s. They're losing 40 years of their life, of all of the potential that they had in that life from that early death. And you can add that up across every single opioid-related death that happened across the country and find that over 250,000 years of life were lost from opioid toxicities in Canada in 2021 alone.
Can you elaborate on what is driving the trend?
There are likely a few things. We certainly saw the pandemic made things worse. We know that people were more likely to be using drugs alone during the pandemic because we were told to distance from one another, and because many community-based programs were also having reduced hours or having to shut down. And so we saw these negative impacts of the pandemic. But we've also seen even before that the arrival of fentanyl into the illicit drug supplies, and that happened across from BC all the way across to Ontario and is now starting to creep even further east. And with that fentanyl arrival in the illicit supply, this is an opioid that is very potent and often is available in multiple different types of fentanyl that have different potencies mixed with sedatives, and that can make the supply people are accessing not only really dangerous to use, but also really unpredictable. So on a day-to-day basis, people don't know what is in the supply, and their bodies aren't able to adjust to those different potencies, and they can't actually adjust how they use drugs to keep themselves safe because they simply don't know what is in the supply that they're using. And I think that's what we're seeing really drive a lot of these increases that we've seen across the country.
Manitoba stood out in this report, and anyone who lives here, I live here, we've been doing stories on the challenges and the growing crisis here. It's not all that surprising to me that we stood out, and it's not for a good reason, right?
Yeah, unfortunately not. And I think something that really stood out to us with Manitoba is how quickly things are accelerating there. So while we saw, doubling or in some cases tripling of rates of deaths in other parts of the country, in Manitoba between 2019 and 2021, there was a five-fold increase in opioid-related deaths. And when you look at what substances are contributing to those deaths, it is increasingly fentanyl and fentanyl-type opioids. So I think that there's a real acceleration happening in Manitoba right now that's incredibly concerning.
Where do we go from here? Like, what's the takeaway from the research in your view when it comes to the crisis across Canada?
I mean, first of all, it's just the urgency, the amount of people's lives who are being cut short, and the fact that these deaths are really accidental and preventable is really what strikes home for me, and that we know what we can do to help prevent these harms. We know that if we could invest and get governments to invest in treatment as well as harm reduction, so safe spaces to use drugs, safe alternatives to the unregulated drug supply in combination with accessible treatment, we could really start to provide a better slate of options for people to access and keep themselves safe when using these supplies. But unfortunately, that's not the response of all governments. Many are just focusing on, one response. Often it is on a treatment and recovery side of things. And I'm really concerned about that because without adequate investments into other services and specifically harm reduction services, we're going to continue to see all of these deaths continue to climb across the country.
Just out of curiosity before you go, was there any province that fared well in this?
We do see some of the Atlantic provinces where the death rates are much, much lower. And when you look at what is contributing to those deaths, there simply isn't fentanyl in the supplies there, or when it does arrive, it is for very short periods of time in localized settings. Those deaths are usually involving prescription opioids, and they happen much more rarely. And I think that can be really tied to the fact that if it's a prescription-grade opioid, people know what is in that substance. They know what they're taking, and they can adjust their dose to keep themselves safe. And so it really comes back to that unpredictability of the supply that we see more across Western Canada that's really leading to these accidental deaths.
Appreciate your time this morning. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Tara Gomes is senior author of a new report on opioid-related deaths across this country. It is published today in the Canadian Medical Association Journal. Our guest, by the way, is also Scientific Director at Unity Health Toronto. If you want to read the latest stats that we have from CBC, his latest report came out in March about where we're on track for in terms of the number of overdose deaths overall for Manitoba. You can check out that story, that data, as I mentioned, coming out last month, cbc.ca/Manitoba. Speaking of news, Heather Wells is back with updates on other stories.
Good morning. Well, people in Ericsdale worry they may die waiting for a new emergency room. CBC obtained data suggesting EM Crow Hospital's ER was closed more than it was open last year. We'll hear more about it and the impact it's having on the community. The owners of the Winnipeg Jets say they have never lost money on the team, not even during a recent downturn in ticket sales. Mark Chipman at True North Sports and Entertainment says all revenue streams available available to the Jets have allowed them to turn a profit since 2011. And in February, you may recall, Chipman made some comments about low ticket sales, leading to speculation about the team moving from Winnipeg. We're going to hear from Mark Chipman coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, Bartley Kivas did a feature interview with Mark Chipman. So they sat down for an hour. So that's where our ongoing stories and coverage are coming from. We're going to hear that piece of that interview around finances this morning. That's coming up at 7:40 for you. We're also going to hear reaction from both the Jewish and Iranian communities on Iran's direct attack on Israel over the weekend. So that is coming up for you in the next hour. And then speaking of stories in the news, we also have Bryce Hoy, who's going to be coming in to look more deeply at what's happening at the Eriksdale ER and what concerns folks have there. So stay with us. Lots still to come on the program. It is right now in Winnipeg 3 degrees. It is partly cloudy and probably going to see that increasing cloud this morning and a high of 16. Winds will stay light until they're not. So that's going to be kind of into tonight. Cloudier, chance of showers, gusty winds, low 5, and then into tomorrow it gets messier. But for today, increasing cloud and 16. Right now it's 3. If you need us on the drive, walk or roll, call the commute line 788-3093. All looking good so far this Monday. World Report's next. Stay with us on CBC.
Today on The Current.
The algorithm is filled with all sorts of nutrition and diet advice, but some experts warn that the food industry and some dietitians are too close for comfort, and that dietitians are being paid to promote harmful information online. It's coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is reconvening his war cabinet. They are meeting right now to decide how to respond to Iran's attack. This weekend, Tehran launched hundreds of missiles and drones directly at Israel. Now, world leaders are urging Israel to show restraint. The CBC's Chris Brown is in Jerusalem with the latest.
Israel's war cabinet met Sunday, and the country's chief military spokesman Daniel Hagari indicated some kind of Israeli military response against Iran is coming.
We approved operational plans for both offensive and defensive action.
Still, it remains unclear how and when that will happen. Iran launched hundreds of drones, rockets, and cruise missiles at Israel overnight on Saturday in retaliation for an Israeli attack on its diplomatic consulate in Syria 2 weeks ago. British Foreign Secretary David Cameron is among the world leaders urging Israel not to escalate the dangerous tit-for-tat cycle of violence.
Iran suffered this defeat because the attack was a failure. The world can see what a malign influence they are. And I think that the right thing to do is not to escalate.
There were similar pleas from the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres.
Now is the time to defuse and de-escalate.
Iran's ambassador to the UN, Syed Iravani, says his country considers the score between the two foes to be even, but that Iran is prepared if Israel strikes back.
The Israeli Prime Minister's policy seeks to expand and escalate the conflict in the region to stay in power.
Israel has relaxed some of the security measures it took in advance of the Iranian strike, reopening schools and universities, but many international airlines are continuing to avoid the region. Chris Brown, CBC News, Jerusalem.
In Australia, some disturbing details are emerging about the man accused of the mass stabbing at a mall in Sydney. Police say it appears the suspect targeted women. 5 of the 6 people killed were women. So were most of the 12 people injured during the attack on Saturday. Andrew Couchy is the suspect's father. He says his son had a history of mental illness.
Ziyou is a monster. To me, he was a very sick boy. Believe me, he was a very sick boy. Because he wanted a girlfriend, and he's got no social skills, and he was frustrated out of his brain.
The 40-year-old suspect was shot and killed by police. A special strike force has been created to investigate the attack. The Washington Post is reporting the FBI has opened a criminal investigation into the Baltimore bridge collapse last month. Officials familiar with the matter say the probe will be taking a closer look at the crew on the container ship and whether they left port knowing the vessel had serious problems. The ship lost power and slammed into one of the bridge's support pillars. We have an update to a story CBC News broke last week. It found Ontario taxpayers have paid $134 million for police officers suspended with pay. Now some officers are coming forward. They say systemic issues are to blame. But there is an alternative. The CBC's Julie Ireton has the story.
Hey. Constable Pierre Fournier volunteers at a farm in rural Ottawa. He was suspended from the city's police service for a year. In 2021, he was in a brief off-duty altercation with teens he says were trespassing on a nearby property. Criminal charges against the officer were eventually dropped, but he was found guilty of discreditable conduct. He's now on medical leave. Fournier and other suspended officers tell CBC police chiefs suspend too quickly. Cops are too often investigated by their own colleagues, and the rules are not applied consistently.
Some people are doing some things that are not getting suspended for, and some are not even getting a slap on the hand.
Charles Bordelot disagrees. He's the former president of the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police. He says chiefs judge each case on these criteria.
Seriousness of the offense, public safety aspects, the workplace safety as well, and also the organizational reputation. And it's not a decision that's taken very lightly.
Another former chief says police leadership could turn to restorative justice rather than suspension in some cases. Vern White was a police chief in Ottawa and Durham.
First of all, they had to accept responsibility, which is key in restorative justice. And, secondly, that it was dealt with quickly.
White says bringing the two sides together can hold the officer accountable and build bridges with the community. Julie Ireton, CBC News, Ottawa.
The United Nations says Sudan's civil war is one of the worst humanitarian crises in recent history. It has forced more than 10 million people to flee their homes. Those who remain face violence, disease, and a lack of food and medicine. Today, the international community is meeting in Paris, hoping to restart ceasefire talks. Philip Lishanok reports.
Edem Warsornu heads the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. She says every hour a child in a refugee camp in North Darfur dies from malnutrition. She wants the international community to take notice.
The Paris International Humanitarian Conference will be an opportunity to shed light. The people of Sudan deserve our attention.
She says conditions are difficult for more than 8 million people who are internally displaced and almost 2 million people who have fled to neighboring countries, Egypt, Chad, and South Sudan. And the international aid sent is only a fraction of the billions needed. Canada announced that it will send $132 million in humanitarian aid. International Development Minister Ahmed Hussein says some organizations will be cutting operations.
Without additional humanitarian assistance for Sudan, the World Food Program will stop providing food rations to displaced Sudanese in the country of Chad.
He says Canada will have a presence at the humanitarian conference in Paris.
We will also be at that meeting and beyond exploring together and discussing what other options can we put on the table.
While the European Union, Sudan's neighboring countries, and aid agencies will also be present, the conference will not have representation from either side of the warring Sudanese factions. Philip Lishanok, CBC News, Toronto.
Jury selection begins today in the hush money case against Donald Trump. The former U.S. president is accused of trying to cover up payments made to adult film star Stormy Daniels. Prosecutors allege Daniels was paid $130,000 during the 2016 presidential campaign. The money was meant to ensure her silence about a prior sexual relationship with Trump. Trump has denied the allegations. He has pleaded not guilty to all 34 counts against him. This is the first ever criminal trial of a former U.S. president. Concern is growing for a baby orca trapped in a lagoon off Vancouver Island. So far, attempts to rescue the whale calf have failed. Now rescuers are regrouping. The CBC's Lindsay Duncombe has the latest.
The calm surface of the water breaks as the 2-year-old orca known as Brave Little Hunter comes up for air. Simon John, chief of the Ahadasat First Nation, is watching her from a boat. He's leading the team trying to rescue her.
She appears to be really healthy, breathing really well and taking deep dives.
An attempt to lift the orca with a sling and transport her by truck to open water failed. Rescuers are expected to try again this week with bigger boats and different nets. Paul Cottrell is with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans.
She's on to us for sure. If she knew we were helping, it would be a lot easier.
To help plan their next attempt, crews are relying on old knowledge and new technology, consulting now elderly people who used to trap whales for captivity and LiDAR maps that detail the floor of the lagoon. People who live nearby are watching closely. Karen Beach comes to the lagoon in hopes of seeing the whale.
I feel like there is a chance that they can make it happen. And if they keep trying, where there's a will, there's a way.
It's expected the next rescue attempt could happen sometime this week. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, on the Ahatasat First Nation.
British Columbia and the Haida Nation are embarking on a new relationship. They signed an agreement yesterday, one that recognizes the Haida's inherent right to the land on Haida Gwaii. Tamara Davidson is a representative of the Haida Nation.
This does not mean that the government is granting us anything. We have always held our inherent rights and title to our lands. We were born knowing this is ours.
Haida Gwaii is made up of more than 150 islands off BC's north coast. BC's government says the transfer of land ownership and jurisdiction will be negotiated over time. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
It's quite lovely, that singing, wasn't it? I'm Marcy Marcusa. We're live in downtown Winnipeg under a partly cloudy sky. It's 4 degrees after a warm weekend. Thanks for joining us here on Information Radio on CBC. You're on 89.3, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. In this hour on the show, the owners of the Winnipeg Jets almost never talk money. But CBC's Bartley Kivas recently sat down for a feature interview with True North Mark Chipman and asked how the team's finances are doing. We're going to bring you specifically that part of the conversation. That's coming up at 7:40. Also this hour on the program, the conflict between Iran and Israel over the weekend brings fear of a wider regional war. We're going to hear from both members of the local Jewish and our local Manitoba Iranian communities this hour for some reaction on the attacks and what's been developing. Stay tuned. That's all straight ahead on Information Radio. Thanks for being with us. Heather Wells is in with headlines.
Good morning. Well, new safety officers start patrolling the Health Sciences Centre this morning. The officers are trained on de-escalation techniques, use of force, and searches and seizures, among other things. Last week, an arbitrator gave Shared Health 30 days to create a safety plan after finding an unacceptable risk to hospital workers going to and from HSC. And a new report on opioid deaths shows almost 5-time increase in overdose deaths in Manitoba between 2019 and 2021. The Canadian Medical Association Journal report looks at opioid deaths right across the country. We'll hear some of what they found in our next local news at 7:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's get into this weather forecast here. Abby's in.
And the mercury went up by 1. It's now 4 degrees in the city. We're expecting that, the cloudy period to roll in on us as you start your morning. And then some winds will be picking up from the southeast. Now, as we look ahead to tonight, we're expecting that mainly cloudy skies to stay with us. And then some showers. We'll see that overnight into tomorrow because I'm just trying to look at the forecast for tomorrow. Cloudy skies that we have overnight would stay with us, and then we'll see some showers in the early morning. But, the rain is expected to set in around noon for tomorrow for those that would be anticipating that. Now, across the province, Brandon is at 6 for up north. Tuesday, remember, you're expecting a mix-up of rain turning into snow by Wednesday, and then we're looking at that 30 to 50 millimeters in total. Thompson is currently at 0. Churchill is currently at -15. Dauphin is at 1. Gimli's at -1, Steinbach at 0, and Morris at 5.
I have the best traffic update.
Bring it on.
Okay, so it's really pretty quiet this morning, and there's crews out there painting. Be careful, or rather cleaning. Be careful for them. But here's my traffic and commuting update. It's about our friend Corey Funk.
Oh, let's go.
Yeah, so Corey has been not commuting, but he has been putting foot to pavement for a very special event. So Corey just completed a 100K race.
Okay, yeah, there we go. We train together. We train together
We
because
could have done it.
the encouragement, he was training and we were encouraging him. So the training, it's a teamwork.
Okay, that part's true. But we did no on the ground training.
No, we didn't do the groundwork. We trained together. Like, Curry, you can do it. It's like that coach.
Corey's back later in the week, but he was just posting, and I wanted to share this because he's our teammate here, and he's worked so hard. This is his very first 100K race. He's down south at Gorge Waterfalls in Cascade Locks. It's not far from Portland, and so it's waterfalls and mountains galore. And he wasn't the only Manitoban there. He was congratulating all of the Flatlanders, as he put it on Facebook, who crushed the well over 3,000 meters of elevation gain. So you're dealing with that as well as dealing with running 100K. His time, 11 hours, 59 minutes, and 38 seconds. He just got in there under the 12-hour mark. So
it worked. The pep talk I gave him worked because I said, Corey, you know what? You can do this. We've been talking about this. You've been running all mornings in winter.
Yep.
Go get it.
So now you know why he was running when it was -40 all through this winter, all those cold mornings. So congrats to our teammate. If you want to give us a call this morning, if you are having any problems on your commute, whether you're out there jogging or you're waiting for the bus or you have something to share if you're driving or biking, 788-3093. Well, a lot of people were glued to coverage over the weekend as tensions continue to rise in the Middle East. Now, this comes specifically after Iran launched drone and missile strikes at Israel over the weekend. It was in retaliation to a suspected Israeli strike on the Iranian embassy in Syria earlier this month. Now, Iran says the April 1st attack killed 16 people, including 2 senior Iranian generals. This is the first time Iran has launched a direct attack on Israel. It does bring fears of a wider regional war, as we had some analysis in the first hour of this morning's show. CBC's Aaron Broman was plugging in, I should say, to the communities here looking at this and watching closely, including the Jewish Federation of Winnipeg. She spoke with CEO Jeff Lieberman for his reaction to the attacks.
Well, after the attack in Damascus, Syria, of the Iranian embassy building, Iran has said that they were going to attack Israel, and I know that Israel was prepared for it, and it's still very difficult. It's the first time since 1991 that Israel was attacked by a foreign country like that. For its citizens, it's a very difficult situation now because you just really never know what's going to happen. But thank goodness Israel has the Iron Dome system and the support of a number of other countries that helped out, and they were able to shoot down over 99% of the rockets, drones that were sent towards Israel.
How is this kind of attack impacting Israelis?
The Israelis that live in Israel, they live in fear all the time. Potential for constant attack from whether it's Hamas or it's Hezbollah from the north or others is there. It's not easy, and they're still fighting the war with Hamas, the terrorist organization. So, for the average Israeli, it's life is not easy all the time, and everyone has a safe room in their home. And when rockets are launched, people go into their safe spaces, and unfortunately, it becomes something that's very regular. And as a Canadian, it's hard to think of that's the way you have to live. But in Manitoba, there's a number of Israeli families. They all have family and friends that are still in Israel. People are fearful for their friends and relatives' lives.
There is widespread concern that this will result now in a retaliation from Israel. What is your position on that? Whether that should occur?
Yeah, well, Netanyahu has said that that Israel will probably retaliate. The hope is that this won't escalate into anything more than that, than what it is now, and that cooler heads will prevail, and the two sides will stand down. But I don't think anybody wants the war to escalate. I certainly don't want that to happen. There's just too many people's lives on both sides that are affected, and a very difficult situation for everyone. And for Israelis especially, their ongoing fight now with Hamas. It's difficult if something opens up on another front as well. Hamas is funded by Iran, and if they couldn't negotiate the deal to release the hostages, Israel is going to eventually go back in there and do what they need to do. It's not a great situation, that's for sure. And Hamas needs to release the hostages. You just can't get away from that. I just pray for peace and hope that the situation doesn't escalate for all Israelis in Israel and around the world.
That was CBC's Aaron Broman speaking to Jewish Federation of Winnipeg CEO Jeff Lieberman over the weekend. Now, they were talking, of course, about what has been unfolding. Iran's leadership, speaking of unfolding, has said that this attack was the extent of its retaliation for the suspected Israeli bombing of its embassy in Syria. But as we had analysis on World Report and earlier this hour, we are still waiting to see what Israel might do next. Now, CBC's Gavin Axelrod spoke to Arian Arianpour for a reaction to the attacks over the weekend as well. He is president of the Iranian community of Manitoba.
It's really heartbreaking to see that the regime who has been turmoiling the region for more than 4 decades is turmoiling it again, but on a bigger scale. The Iranian community of Manitoba, ICM, condemns the attacks of the Islamic Republic regime on Israel. We are monitoring the situation very closely. And at this point in time, at least, there doesn't seem to be a probability of a full-scale war. But I think we should all be on a standby to see how developments will turn out to be. At this point in time, I do not think that we will have a full-scale war for obvious reasons. None of the parties here would necessarily benefit from a full-scale war. But if that happens, on top of all the atrocities that it brings to the Iranian people, given the already chaotic social and economic situation, the Islamic Republic regime will use a war or even a higher level of tensions as a tool to suppress the Iranian people even more. And they have shown that during the Iran-Iraq war. If that happens, the people of Iran are the ones who will suffer most. And I'd like to note that, and this is important for everyone to know, Iran as a nation is not at war with Israel. The Islamic Republic regime is. So I think we should all act accordingly. The Iranian or non-Iranian communities, local or national politicians, international organizations, and the governments of the free world must understand that and act based on this fact.
Why is that so important for you to make that designation here in the media?
It is in general important to understand the difference between the regime that is ruling Iran and the people of Iran. The people of Iran are in favor of peace, are open-minded, they are sacrificing their lives to get freedom and the justice that they deserve. They have showcased that in the ongoing Women Life Freedom Revolution. And actually, the only way that we can change the situation in Middle East is to get rid of the Islamic Republic regime. And the only way to do that is to support the Women Life Freedom Revolution, and secondly, to designate IRGC as a terrorist organization. Most of people living in Canada, including Manitoba and Winnipeg, even if they are born here, they have family or friends back in Iran. So of course they are on edge. You have a regime in Iran that has shown their unreasonableness. You have Israel on the other side, you'll never know what's going to happen. At this point in time, the most important question is how Israel is going to respond, and maybe then we will have a better understanding of what's going to happen in the next few days and weeks and months.
That was CBC's Gavin Axelrod speaking to Ariane Arampour for a reaction to the attacks over the weekend. Go to CBC's website for more updates as this continues to unfold.
Whether it's breaking news from around the world, across the country, or in your own hometown, it's all at your fingertips on the CBC News app. Get the top stories from where you live under the local tab, or watch video clips, live events, and the national on your smartphone or tablet. Get all the news you want, when you want it, where you want it, with the CBC News app. Download the app for free today.
This is your heart. This is your heart after discovering a new CBC podcast. These are your feet. These are your feet after finding a CBC Music playlist. This is your brain. This is your brain after hearing your favorite CBC radio show. Fall in love at first listen with the CBC Listen app. Stream CBC audio anytime, anywhere, all for free. Download CBC Listen today.
7:24 a.m. is the time right now on 89.3 FM, 9:90 a.m. on the app or YouTube this morning. Coming up on the program in about an hour from now after 8, a Manitoba woman has questions about why one of her physio sessions for post-op knee replacement wasn't covered by Manitoba Health. The province did announce that it was spending $2.5 million, so all patients would have coverage for these services. And they have shared that in their most recent budget, that's the intention. So is she caught in the gap between what the budget announced and what is actually covered? We're going to talk to her about what has gone on with her post-op surgery and coverage. That's coming up in an hour from now. It is 4 degrees in Winnipeg, and it is also 7:24. And it is also time to get caught up on morning sports. If you watched the Jets game over the weekend, you're probably thrilled. Like, what a game to head into the playoffs with. 7-0 for the Jets. But Scott Reguer, who's smiling along with us, is actually going to start with the other huge thing in hockey. Canada, once again, on top of the world, Scott.
Yes, indeed, Marcy. And once again, Marie-Philippe Poulin was the catalyst. Known as Captain Clutch for scoring when it matters most, Poulin had 2 goals to lead Canada past the U.S. last night for World Championship gold. It adds to a resume that already included clinching goals at the 2021 Worlds, as well as, a couple of Olympic finals, too. Poulin's contribution last night may have been the most surprising, though, given she entered the tournament with an injury and hadn't scored a goal yet.
It's not like I was not trying like all tournament. I think it's a process. It's a journey. And obviously coming here today, it was a big game. I mean, 6-5. When's the last time we had this type of game against the U.S.? It was surreal. It was loud. It was fun. And so happy for this group.
Since Poulin posed the question, Marcy, the last time so many goals were scored between these two rivals, 9 years ago at the World Championships. This rivalry, though, for many, is, if not the fiercest and closest in sport, certainly one of them. And underlying just how close it is, Edmonton's Danielle Serdachny had the overtime winner last night, which gives Canada the edge all time in goals scored when these nations meet at the World Championships. It's now 104 to 103 for the Canadians. Incredible.
Let's move over to golf, because incredible also sums up Scottie Scheffler, his performance at the Masters. And he always kind of just looks like he's trotting along through the park eating a granola bar.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's like he's just laser focused. Man, can he golf?
Unbelievable. Yeah, he's also 27 and looks 47 and has a demeanor to match, right?
Yeah, full on.
So he claimed, did Scheffler, the sport's most prestigious tournament for the second time in 3 years yesterday. He's just, as you alluded to, the model of consistency when others are stressing out around him. He ended up winning by 4 strokes in the end. And Scheffler did it, remember, despite having one of the biggest possible distractions. His wife, Meredith, home in Dallas, where their first child is due any time now. Indeed, Scheffler said, Marcy, throughout the Masters, if she went into labor, he would withdraw from the tournament, head home immediately to be by her side. As is tradition, Scheffler was presented with his green jacket in Butler Cabin.
About to make me cry here in Butler Cabin. No, it's a very, very special time for both of us. I can't put into words what it means to win this tournament again. I really can't put it into words what it's going to be like to be a father for the first time. So looking forward to getting home and celebrating with Meredith. And it's been a long week here without her, but I'm just looking forward to getting home.
Yeah, there's a man with his priorities in order. When he returns to the links, though, Marcy, he's going to do so as the most dominant player, really, that we've seen since Tiger Woods was in his prime. Since Scheffler claimed his first PGA title just over 2 years ago at the Phoenix Open, he's now compiled 10 tour victories. This year, this calendar year alone, he hasn't shot a single round over par.
Yeah.
Consistency, just incredible.
It's crazy.
Yeah, and I talked about Tiger Woods, by the way. Many interested in how he made out. Well, he'd rather forget it. He finished 60th, dead last. But again, let's always remember he made the cut and set a record in doing that 24 straight times. And with his injuries, just the fact that he was back, seemed to be enjoying, well, for most of the weekend anyway, golf again. And he's committed to playing in the PGA Championship next month. So this is good news in the end for Tiger, despite that result. Let's
finish with soccer. How things go for Valor in their Canadian Premier League opener?
Well, not the way they would have liked against Vancouver FC. They started out well. First half goal from newcomer Jordan Schweibel gave the team the lead, but then a former Valor player equalized for his new club in Vancouver. That's Moses Dyer, who's actually the franchise leader for Valor in goals to this day. So 4-1 final in the end for Vancouver, and the head coach, Philip Dos Santos for Valor, thought back to last year's opener when they won over York. And then in the very end of the season ended with the worst record in the league. So Dos Santos reminding his players, this is not a sprint. This is a marathon. Things will change. They play their first 7 matches, by the way, this season on the road as new turf is being installed at Princess Auto Stadium. Next match for Valor coming up against Pacific FC in Victoria Friday. And, of course, the Jets, wonderful wins over Dallas and then over Colorado 7-0. Next up, the Seattle Kraken. Tomorrow night, we'll talk all about it.
All right. Thanks, Scott.
You bet.
Scott Regehr, Morning Sports. Let's give a quick traffic note here before we get into the news. Thompson called, saying a stalled car northbound close to the median, Portage and Main before McDermott. So it is blocking one lane there. 788-3093 is the number to call. Right now, your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it's 4 degrees. We're headed to 16 today with increasing clouds. Enjoy today because it all changes starting tomorrow. Colder, wetter weather moves in. People in Eriksdale worry they may die waiting for a new emergency room. CBC obtained data suggesting E.M. Crow Hospital's ER was closed more than it was open last year. 67-year-old Dale Lloyd worked there for 35 years as a medical records clerk. Her heart stopped on the job 15 years ago. Nurses saved her life, and she's grateful for the care she received, but worries about the repeated ER closures.
I've told my partner if Eriksdale's not on call and I have a heart attack, you head south, and if you make it to Stonewall and I survive, great.
Staff at E.M. Crow Hospital say they are overworked because of the staffing shortages. The NDP has pledged to build a new ER in Eriksdale in the coming years, and the Interlake Eastern Regional Health Authority says it is actively recruiting more workers. New safety officers start patrolling the Health Sciences Centre this morning. The officers are trained on de-escalation techniques, use of force, and searches and seizures, among other things. Last week, an arbitrator gave Shared Health 30 days to create a safety plan after finding an unacceptable risk to hospital workers going to and from the HSC. The province says institutional safety officers at Manitoba's largest hospital will have access to the right tools, including pepper gel. It adds more training classes for these officers are planned over the next 3 months. The goal is to hire 105 new safety officers across HSC, St. Boniface Hospital, Victoria General, Brandon Regional Health Centre, and the Selkirk Mental Health Centre. The owners of the Winnipeg Jets say they have never lost money on the team, not even during a recent downturn in ticket sales. Mark Chipman, executive chair at True North Sports and Entertainment, says all the revenue streams available to the Jets have allowed them to turn a profit since 2011. That's when True North purchased the Atlanta Thrashers and brought them to Winnipeg.
From an overall perspective, no, we've never lost money in our NHL years. Previous years we did.
In February, comments made by Chipman about low ticket sales led to speculation about moving the team from Winnipeg. You can hear more on this story with CBC's Bartley Kivas right after this newscast right here on Information Radio. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, U.S. President Joe Biden, and the other G7 leaders have come together condemning Iran's weekend attack on Israel, calling it an unprecedented assault. However, they urge Israel to show restraint as it considers a response. British Foreign Secretary David Cameron.
The attack was a failure. The world can see what a malign influence they are. And I think that the right thing to do is not to escalate.
Iran launched hundreds of drones, rockets, and cruise missiles at Israel, most of which were intercepted without causing any significant damage. Now, the Iranian associations in Manitoba are calling on Canada to designate Iran's Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organization. Ariane Arianpour is president at the Iranian community of Manitoba and says Manitobans must make a distinction between Iranian people and the regime.
I do not think that we will have a full-scale war, but if that happens, Islamic Republic regime will use a war as a tool to suppress the Iranian people even more.
Arianpour says members of the community worry about family and friends still living in Iran. He says the regime must be stopped if there's ever going to be peace in the Middle East. The CEO of the Winnipeg Jewish Federation, Jeff Lieberman, also worries things in the region will only get worse. A new report on opioid deaths shows an almost 5-time increase in overdose deaths in Manitoba between 2019 and 2021. The Canadian Medical Association Journal report looks at opioid deaths right across the country, analyzing accidental deaths across 9 Canadian provinces and territories. Those deaths more than doubled in that time, and Manitoba had the greatest increase in opioid deaths in that 3-year period of study. Overall, Alberta had the highest number of deaths, followed by Saskatchewan. Manitoba is third. You can hear more about this report coming up on World Report at 8. It's almost game on at the Sargent Park tennis court. Starting this year, people get to play for free. Ronnie Guevara has played tennis there for decades. He says the city's decision to take back control of the courts will attract more players.
The camaraderie there is really great. We have a good community there. We play anytime we want without any restrictions, so that's a big deal for us.
A City of Winnipeg committee recently voted not to renew the lease of the nonprofit that ran those courts for 10 years. People living in the area say fees and limited hours were a barrier for those wanting to try the sport. Guevara and other tennis buffs gathered yesterday to celebrate their victory. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's get into what's happening in our regional forecast now. We've all been alluding to a special weather statement in the forecast, but today actually is kind of straight ahead. Abby?
Yes, straight ahead. The clear skies we saw is now giving way to some cloudy conditions coming in. I can see that through the windows here. We are at 4 degrees here in Winnipeg. You need to keep an eye out for those clouds that I talked about rolling in, and then you see some southeast winds accompany that. Don't worry, the temperature is going to get to a pleasant high of 16 degrees, making it still warm and enjoyable for today. Heading west to Brandon, it's currently 6 degrees with mostly cloudy conditions. Today will remain cloudy with a chance of showers later, and then we'll see some southeast winds also. High for today in Brandon, 16. Now for folks up north, we've been talking about it since we started the show. You need to get ready for a weather mix-up. Rain is expected to start Tuesday morning and then a transition to snow by Wednesday across the northern part of the province. We're looking at a total of 30 to 50 millimeters of rain and snow over the next 3 days. Like places like Lean Lake and Thompson should brace for snow, while areas further south like the Parr and Norway House are likely to see more rain. Thompson is sitting at 0 degrees. Further north, Churchill is at minus 15 with freezing fog, and we'll see a high of 0 in Churchill today. Dauphin is currently at 1 degree, heading to 13. Gimli is at minus 1, heading to a high of 14. Steinbach is at 0, heading to a high of 16, and Morris is at 5, heading to a high of 16.
Thank you, Abby.
You're welcome. welcome.
In the commute this morning, you should be fine out there. If you're waiting for the bus or on your bike, certainly. If you're driving, be careful for the street cleaning equipment. I know the streets were wet, and I'm like, did the rain start already? But it was just them cleaning things up. We do have one call. Thompson called a stalled car northbound close to the median, Portage in Maine, before McDermott. It had been blocking one lane, and that was just in the last half hour here, but that could be cleared by now. 788-3093 if you have an update on that or anything new to pass along. Well, the playoffs are just around the corner for the Winnipeg Jets after that amazing game over the weekend. Things look good. They shut out the Colorado Avalanche 7-0. Which was just incredible. The goals just kept coming and coming and coming. And that is who we play in the first round of the playoffs. Playoffs start April 20th. But how are the Jets doing, the club itself, that is? Despite a decline in ticket sales, True North, as you've been hearing in the news, says the club has never lost money. But there is some nuance there. True North Sports and Entertainment executive Mark Chipman recently sat down, as we've been mentioning, for a feature interview with CBC senior reporter Bartley Kivas. Now, this is part of their conversation in which he touches on the team's finances.
We never would have been able to even conceive of it if there wasn't a partnership between the league and the players by way of a salary cap and revenue distribution. This market would not survive without that. That's a fact.
Revenue sharing doesn't work here in the NHL the way it works in the NFL the same way. I understand it, though. It's not like you get a piece of the gate at any other market, correct?
Indirectly, you do. I mean, it's a very complex pooling of revenues across the league that refer to as HRR, hockey-related revenues, that we have to follow very, very carefully, and we get audited every year to ensure that everything's accounted for properly. But the NFL is a behemoth. You can't really talk about it in the same terms. That's a league that doesn't have to sell tickets, literally, in order for it to be profitable. The NHL still is very much a gate-driven business.
Have the Winnipeg Jets ever lost money on hockey operations?
The answer is yes, but I would have to explain further that we run a series of P&Ls, including the arena itself, like a profit and loss statement. So there's a combination of things that fold up into an overall. So from an overall perspective, no, we've never lost money in our NHL years. Previous years we did. So when you combine it all, it can be a profitable enterprise, and it has been. I would say this: the reason I'm comfortable saying that we can exist long term is because we've very intentionally, from our earliest days, said the only way this will work is if we continually reinvest in it. Like, in other words, in the 28 years that we've been doing this, nothing that's been earned has ever been distributed. There's never been a distribution of earnings, of profitability outside of the organization to any partner. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that to appear overly altruistic or, it's just a fact that in order to live in this NHL world, we have to continually reinvest, whether it's in our building, which we're up to, we've almost invested as much in renos as we have building it. I think we actually eclipsed that. Because
that was a question. How much has been the capital reinvestment in?
We're at about $90 million.
Okay.
So in terms of pure construction costs, that's about equal to what it cost us in construction to build it. Similarly, our payrolls increased 127%, and so that requires cash. So if you're draining the tank from earnings, then the business cannot be healthy enough to sustain the pressures of trying to keep up. And it's been organic. By merging the two leagues back in 2001, it gave us a chance to be profitable. That gave us a chance to build the building. The building gave us a chance to buy the team. And then once you get in the league, and if you really are trying to win and be competitive, you got to invest. Well, if you're going to invest, you got to keep reinvesting. And so we don't look at it like your garden variety business. You've probably heard us use the word stewards or trustees. Like, it's true. Like, we own it because somebody has to own it, but it doesn't really belong to us.
One micro revenue question for you. It's not that micro. There was a revenue formula released by the former Selinger government regarding the gaming revenue coming out of Shark Club. It averaged around to $5.5 million a year on an average year. With the pandemic, obviously there weren't people gaming there, but is that still significant? Does that help cover off a portion of hockey operations still? How important is that revenue still, and is $5.5 million still accurate?
Yeah, we unfortunately, we've never achieved anywhere near 5.5. The shortfall from inception, last time I looked, would have been, it's north of $30 million of shortfall on that funding mechanism. I mean, it was never a guaranteed source of revenue, and it was always it was an expansion of the original agreement for that we had with the province, all of which was the income from which was dedicated. It never went into the Jet P&L. It always resided inside the building and was directed at paying down debt. We thought it was important that we pay down as much debt as we could, so that's where that revenue has always gone. But unfortunately, so it resides inside the building P&L, but it's nowhere near what we had negotiated or hoped it would be.
So if I do 30 million divided by 13 years in the NHL, then you've never made more than 3 million out of that.
That's correct. It would be, and it would vary from year to year. And there was obviously a massive hit during the pandemic. It was really slow to come on board. It started to get close and then came down, and it's starting again, but it's way short of what we had hoped it would be.
That was Mark Chipman, Executive Director of True North Sports and Entertainment, in a sit-down interview with CBC Manitoba senior reporter Bartley Kivas. If you want to read more about their entire conversation, cbc.ca/Manitoba. It is right now 7:45 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. or on the app. And a bit of music this morning from a Victoria duo called John and Roy. They're currently out on the road across Europe with their new music. Their new EP is called Restore. This is the title track.
Picking up these dormant thoughts that I haven't had around for a while. Coming out of forget days, imagining worlds that are uninspired. Got to go where I can restore my fire. Got to go where I can restore. Sometimes we all get lost and lose sight of what we need in our lives. Locked down by the things to do, the routines that sap us and drive. Gotta go where I can restore my fire. Gotta go where I can restore. The muse that I need, that awakens me and ignites this reverie. There I go. Gotta go where I can restore. Gotta go where I can restore my fire. Gotta go where I can restore.
From Victoria, John and Roy with Restore. The new EP is out now, the same name. You might have done some restoring over the weekend in the sunshine. We nearly got to that 20. We got over 19 on Saturday. We are flirting with it. Although this week's going to be kind of strange because the temperatures are going to get a little bit lower. We're going to get rain. We're going to get snow in northern Manitoba. Mostly rain here in Winnipeg with a system that moves into the province earnestly tomorrow. Right now, though, this morning, it is partly cloudy, 4 degrees, and our high today is going to be around 16. Well, next in this show, let's get outside the perimeter here. The ER in Ericsdale was closed more than it was open last year. The province has announced plans to hire more healthcare workers and build a new emergency room in Ericsdale in the coming years. But as you've been hearing in the news, staffing at the existing one at the E.M. Crow Hospital has been a big part of the challenge. It's one of the main reasons that it is so often closed. Last month, the CBC's Bryce Hoy was up in Ericsdale as part of the CBC's Communities in Focus. He was the Community Pop-Up Bureau in the West Interlake in the overall area. And he's in studio this morning to talk about how people in Ericsdale are coping with the local hospital's spotty emergency room access. Good morning.
Morning, Mars.
So how spotty are we talking about here?
Yeah, so we got numbers through a Freedom of Information request that suggests that E.M. Crow Hospital experienced about 63 disruptions or closures to its ER last year. Now, what that translates to is the equivalent of more than 300 days of closure. So, like you were saying, closed more than it was open last year. Now, that same data suggests that Lakeshore Hospital in Ashern, about 40 kilometers to the north, had about 128 disruptions for the equivalent of about 91 days worth of closures. So, not as bad as in Ericsdale, but that's about a quarter of the year of closure. So we're getting to see a bit of the picture in the Interlake there. Now, people won't be shocked to hear who are listening right now that a big part of what's behind this is staffing challenges. We hear about this kind of all over the place, right? And tomorrow on the show, we're actually going to hear more on that from our colleague Josh Crabb about just how widespread these rural and northern ER closures and disruptions really are in Manitoba.
So for today, let's stick with the ER in Ericsdale. What are people saying about how those closures around that area affect them, in Ericsdale? How concerned are they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, I spoke with a bunch of people while I was there for that week, and I got the distinct impression that it's eroded people's trust in the ER in their backyard. Now, Dale Lloyd worked at E.M. Crow Hospital for about 35 years as a medical records clerk. Her heart actually stopped on the job 15 years ago. Lucky it happened there, right? She got saved, or the nurses saved her life. They shipped her to Winnipeg. She received care there for about a month, and then she was off on her way. Now, she still has a heart condition, but she's grateful to be alive. She says the staff there super skilled, but she's lost confidence in the ER in recent times due to all of these closures.
I've told my partner if Ericsdale's not on call and I have a heart attack, you head south, and if you make it to Stonewall and I survive, great, but my chances are better. That's a half-hour, 45-minute drive north, and Stonewall's at least an hour south. So depending on what's wrong with you, you might not stand a chance.
So Lloyd says she thinks people in her community are going to die because the services just aren't there.
So when you look in that area, where are people in Ericsdale going when their ER is closed?
Right. So I alluded to Ashern's Lakeshore Hospital a moment ago, right? I spoke with folks in Ashern and Ericsdale. There was a theme, and it went kind of like this. People said they or a family member or a friend needed emergency care, but Ericsdale's ER was closed, so they had to head to Ashern 40 kilometers north. Or they were going to go to Ashern, but turns out it was closed that day as well, so both closed. So folks go to Stonewall or Selkirk or Gimli, an hour or more away, and you can already see how that might create extra tension to an already tense situation. So I spoke with Keith Lundell. He's a longtime local healthcare advocate in Ericsdale. Now, he shared a few stories with me. One was about a nurse. She actually used to work at E.M. Crow Hospital. Now, he says a few years ago, she needed emergency care for herself.
They got loaded up and said, oh, no, we can't take you to Ashern. They're closed. On the way to Stonewall, they got probably, I think, 20 miles down the road. Stonewall says, no, we're closed now. And, it just like it wasn't hallway medicine. It was highway medicine. And nobody deserves that.
So now the NDP has promised to build a new ER in Ericsdale. They actually campaigned on that promise. The Premier was saying, actually to you a couple of weeks ago, the target is to have shovels in the ground within 2 years, same as with the plans for the Vic here in Winnipeg. But Lundale said what's the point in building a state-of-the-art emergency department if you don't have staff to keep it open 24/7?
How are the shortages that you've been referring to, how are they impacting the workers that are there?
They are impacting the workers big time from what I can tell. I spoke with Dr. Jade Young. She's born and raised in Ericsdale. She's a Métis physician who spends some of her time working in Garden Hill First Nation, but most of the time she's in Ericsdale's clinic. This is across the street from E.M. Crow Hospital in Ericsdale, and then she's at the hospital itself and in the ER. Now, she's been there for 3 years, and she says just in that time, there's been a drastic decline in access to emergency care. Just to illustrate this for you, she says there used to be 4 lab technologists. Now there's only 1. And you can't run an emergency department without a lab technologist. They do x-rays, blood work, everything. She also says the hospital is supposed to have 3 staff physicians. Now, a few years ago, it had 2.5, the equivalent of 2.5. Now it's down to 1.5. And Dr. Young says workers are getting burned out.
I do my best to transfer people out who are not going to be sorted in a timely fashion, because I'm a human being that has been, working for typically 30 hours in a row with only like 2 to 3 hours of sleep. The short staff in other sectors, not just physicians, it's contributed to a lot of burnout in physicians in the smaller rural community hospitals in the Interlake.
So the Interlake Eastern Regional Health Authority says they're actively recruiting more workers, including physicians. They've got 6 international medical grads on the way to the region this summer, and 2 have already accepted jobs in Ashern.
It's your turn now, Bryce, to answer the million-dollar question.
Okay.
You ready? Apart from plans for the new ER, what else is the NDP government going to do to address staffing issues? Like, where are they going to find the workers?
They have their work cut out for them. The NDP earmarked $300 million or so in the budget this year for recruiting and retaining workers. They're going to be restoring a physician recruitment fund. They've pledged to hire 1,000 healthcare workers, including 100 physicians. Health Minister Uzoma Asagwara told me that the government's focused on trying to offer more training within communities. The goal is to then end up with more people like Dr. Young, who have roots somewhere and they're more likely to stay or return to their communities. But in the meantime, there's still this urgent need to boost healthcare access in Ericsdale, emergency rooms included, because it's an aging community. And Donna Kingsley, I spoke with her, she's 75, and she said that she's called Ericsdale home for around 4 decades, the area. And she doesn't want to leave, but she's questioning whether she should move to Winnipeg just to be closer to more emergency care options.
What do? Do I stay in the community or do I move closer to Winnipeg? And the emergency care in Winnipeg is already overburdened. And the other thing is, how can we encourage people to come and live in our community if they don't have health care system?
So she told me that she actually wrote the health minister and health authority. She said that in that letter, she outlined a number of concerns, including some of the ones we just heard about aging in Ericsdale.
What about the quality of care, Bryce, that they're getting there, like when they can get into the ER?
Yeah, I heard all sorts of nice things from folks in Ericsdale about that. The feeling I got was that there's this deep appreciation in the community for the workers that are at E.M. Crow Hospital. Even Dale Lloyd, who we heard from earlier, she said similar things. She's 67 now. She has some of the same concerns as Donna Kingsley. She has loved ones who have had strokes, cancer. Some have heart issues. She has a heart condition. She says she knows from so many years working there at the hospital that it can provide life-saving emergency care, just like it did 15 years ago for her, but it just needs more support.
I've seen lives saved, lives that you didn't think were going to be saved. And it's urgent to get something happening back in our hospital. 2 days in 2 weeks doesn't cut it.
So there are some upgrades coming to the Ashern facility, Lakeshore, soon that could help improve emergency access care in the region. Dale, who we just heard from, and others say that the new ER on the horizon in Ericsdale holds promise, but in the interim, they're looking to the region and the province to focus on hiring more people to improve access to care.
All right, Bryce, thank you very much.
Thanks, Mars.
Special report from Bryce Hoy, who's a reporter here at CBC Manitoba, but spent some time working for Communities in Focus up in the Eriksdale-Ashern area. If you want to read more on his story, go to our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba, and you can watch the television version as well, of course, tonight on our 6 o'clock news. It's 3 minutes to 8 o'clock. Speaking of news, Heather Wells is back with headlines.
Good morning. Well, Iranian associations in Manitoba are calling on Canada to designate Iran's Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organization. Ariane Arianpour at the Iranian community of Manitoba says members of the community are worried about family and friends living in Iran after that country launched an attack on Israel over the weekend. You can hear the latest coming up on World Report in just a few minutes. New safety officers start patrolling the Health Sciences Centre this morning. The officers are trained on de-escalation techniques, use of force, and searches and seizures. Last week, an arbitrator gave Shared Health 30 days to create a safety plan after finding an unacceptable risk to hospital workers going to and from the HSC. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Special weather statement for parts of northern Manitoba. We've got quite a system that's moving in here. Could result in snow likely, and it's going to start as rain. Up north, change to snow. Here down south in Winnipeg, it's going to be mostly rain, but we're talking 30 to 50 millimeters total precipitation over the 3-day period over parts of the north. So today, enjoy it before this comes. Partly cloudy in Winnipeg now, a high of 16. The cloud will increase. Early this morning, we'll see how that develops, and then it's 4 degrees right now, later 16, and as I mentioned, winds will pick up with possible showers overnight. On the commute, 788-3093 if you need us. After 8 o'clock on the program, a Manitoba woman says she was covered for 5 physiotherapy sessions through a provincial government program following a knee replacement and was surprised she had to pay out of pocket for her final session. She lost her job 6 months ago. We'll hear her story coming up.
On Cue with Tom Power.
What kind of American are you?
Alex Garland's new film Civil War is about just that, an American civil war set in the not-too-distant future. The states are fighting with one another, the FBI has been disbanded. Alex will be here to talk about how he sees this film as a warning and why it's his love letter to journalism. That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel-Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
The algorithm is filled with all sorts of nutrition and diet advice, but some experts warn that the food industry and some dietitians are too close for comfort, and that dietitians are being paid to promote harmful information online. That's coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Tension is high in the Middle East after Iran's unprecedented weekend attack. Hundreds of missiles were launched at Israel. Almost all were shot down. Now the U.S., Britain, and the head of the UN are all urging Israel to show restraint. The CBC's Chris Brown is in Jerusalem with the latest.
Israel's war cabinet met Sunday, and the country's chief military spokesman Daniel Hagari indicated some kind of Israeli military response against Iran is coming.
We approved operational plans for both offensive and defensive action.
Still, it remains unclear how and when that will happen. Iran launched hundreds of drones, rockets, and cruise missiles at Israel overnight on Saturday, most of which were intercepted without causing significant damage. Iran says the barrage was in retaliation for an Israeli attack on its diplomatic consulate in Syria 2 weeks ago that killed senior military commanders. British Foreign Secretary David Cameron is among the world leaders urging Israel not to escalate the dangerous tit-for-tat cycle of violence.
Iran suffered this defeat because the attack was a failure. The world can see what a malign influence they are. And I think that the right thing to do is not to escalate.
There were similar pleas from the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres.
Now is the time to defuse and de-escalate.
Iran's ambassador to the UN, Syed Iravani, says his country considers the score between the two foes to be even, but that Iran is prepared if Israel strikes back.
The Israeli Prime Minister's policy seeks to expand and escalate the conflict in the region to stay in power.
Israel has relaxed some of the security measures it took in advance of the Iranian strike, reopening schools and universities, but many international airlines are continuing to avoid the region. Chris Brown, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Police in Australia say the man behind Saturday's mass stabbing at a mall appears to have targeted women. 5 of the 6 people killed in the attack in Sydney were women. So were most of the 12 people who were injured. Officials say it could have been worse. Some people in the mall, though, acted quickly. Damien Guéraud told 7 News Australia that he and his friend confronted the attacker.
You cannot think at that moment, just like adrenaline, actually. The eyes was like empty eyes. It was like he wasn't there.
The 40-year-old attacker was shot and killed by a police officer. The man's father says he had a history of mental illness. The rising cost of living is making it difficult for some Canadians to provide funeral arrangements for their loved ones. In St. John's, bodies are being stored in freezers outside a hospital. The morgue is full. Seniors advocates say the real issue is not storage, but a lack of government support for aging Canadians and their next of kin. The CBC's Mike Moore reports.
It is a big concern, and I didn't think it was that big. That we have actually freezers outside of the hospital. I was appalled when I heard that.
Mohammed Abdallah is the executive director of Connections for Seniors in St. John's. He's reacting to the 28 bodies stored in freezers in an alleyway on hospital property in the city. The morgue is full and bodies are going unclaimed. The cost of living is one reason. Next of kin are unable to afford funeral services, and Abdallah says many seniors don't have the savings.
At the end of your life, when your income is about $1,600, there's not much you can do to save $4,000 or $6,000 in order to die in dignity and be buried.
There is some support in Newfoundland and Labrador for families on income support, but the funding hasn't changed in 2 decades. At the federal level, the Canada Pension Plan death benefit also hasn't changed since 1998. The payment is $2,500 for next of kin to cover funeral fees, but Jeff Weaver, president of the national advocacy group Funeral Service Association of Canada, says that has to change.
Seniors need support in our country. It's becoming more and more difficult to make ends meet.
In a statement, the Department of Finance said amendments to the CPP have to be done in conjunction with the provinces, and there were changes made in 2019 that made the $2,500 a flat rate for all pensioners. Mike Moore, CBC News, St. John's.
An international donor conference in Paris is hoping to raise money, more than $1 billion, for aid in Sudan. Today marks 1 year since a civil war erupted between rival military factions. Humanitarian agencies say the conflict has been overshadowed by the wars in Ukraine and Gaza. The violence has killed tens of thousands of people. Justin Brady is with the UN's Office for Humanitarian Affairs.
More people have fled conflict in the past year in Sudan than anywhere else in the world, with 8.6 million people forced to flee their homes, including 4 million children.
Brady also says more than 200,000 children could die of malnutrition in the coming weeks. Tesla is reportedly laying off more than 10% of its workforce, according to the tech publication Electric. The cuts will affect about 15,000 workers. The automaker is struggling with soft demand for its electric vehicles in a highly competitive market. Jury selection begins today in Manhattan in the historic hush money trial for Donald Trump. The former U.S. president is accused of trying to cover up payments made to adult film star Stormy Daniels. Prosecutors allege Trump made the payments during the 2016 election campaign. This is the first ever criminal trial for a former U.S. president. The CBC's Chris Reyes is outside the courthouse and joins me now. Chris, what can you tell us?
Like any other criminal case in this country, the trial will begin with jury selection, a group of 12 people that will have to swear under oath that they'll be fair and impartial. To get to that number, a large pool of potential jurors will be asked 42 questions, which include whether they've attended a Trump rally in the past, whether they support groups like Proud Boys. The judge has ruled the lawyers won't be allowed to ask if a potential juror is Republican or Democrat or who they voted for in the last presidential election. The lawyers will have a limited number of opportunities to object to a juror and possibly strike them out of the pool.
So once the jury is selected, what can we expect during the course of this trial?
We've already seen Trump on trial here in New York in recent months, but those were for civil cases. This is his first criminal case to go to trial, and for that reason, the stakes are much higher and the rules are different. For one, as the defendant of a criminal case, he's required to be here every single day. Court's in session 4 days a week. This trial is expected to last 2 months. When the jury reaches a verdict, if he's found guilty, he could be sentenced to jail. He's facing 34 felony charges of falsifying business records in the first degree. Each charge carries a potential sentence of 4 years in prison. Trump has denied these allegations. He says he will testify. He's expected to face other witnesses in court, including Stormy Daniels. This will be high drama, intensely combative. That much we can predict.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
The CBC's Chris Reyes in Manhattan. Canadians buy a lot of gift cards online, but last fall, one of the big banks started adding a $5 cash advance fee to those cards. CIBC customers reached out to our Go Public team, and now the bank is issuing some refunds. Erica Johnson has the story.
In total, I purchased $45 worth of gift cards.
Catherine Murphy of Oakville, Ontario likes to buy e-gift cards for friends and family. What she didn't like was seeing a $5 fee after each purchase on her Visa bill.
Welcome to CIBC.
She called up CIBC, which told her for cards purchased online or through an app, the bank was now charging a cash advance fee, basically a fee for using your plastic to withdraw money.
I took issue with that only because I didn't feel that I had, instigated a cash advance on my credit card. I'd simply made a gift card purchase.
The bank wouldn't clarify why the charge had started or who was responsible, CIBC or the company selling the gift cards.
I can assure you that it would have stopped me from proceeding with the purchase.
Go Public heard from other people who'd purchased e-gift cards with a CIBC credit card, all unhappy about the fee too.
It's totally unfair.
UBC business prof Murali Chandrasekaran says his research shows customers want transparency and fairness when dealing with companies. Says this added fee fails on both fronts.
Making money is important, but it is also important to make it fairly, with honesty, so that you treat everybody with dignity.
After Go Public contacted CIBC, the bank said the fee will no longer apply and customers will get automatic refunds. A spokesperson wouldn't say why the fee was suddenly added last fall. Erica Johnson, CBC News, Vancouver.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Well, what a weekend that was, right? We still have just a little bit of blue sky with us this morning, but it's mainly cloudy downtown. The sun keeps trying. We are going to be mainly cloud, increasing clouds throughout the morning here. We're expecting after today, we've got this system moving into Manitoba that's going to bring rain to the south, likely rain turning to snow to the north. So enjoy today while you've got it. It's 4 degrees in the city of Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We're live downtown on CBC, 89.3, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. Well, this half hour, a Manitoba woman says she was covered for 5 physiotherapy sessions through a provincial government program following a knee replacement, but then was surprised she had to pay out of pocket for her final session. She's lost her job 6 months ago. She'll have her story with us, and we're also going to give you responses that we got from the province, but not to all of our questions. Stay tuned. 8:11 the time right now. Let's go to Heather Wells to find out what's developing in news. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, people in Ericsdale worry they may die waiting for a new emergency room. CBC obtained data suggesting EM Crow Hospital's ER was closed more than it was open last year. We're going to hear from 67-year-old Dale Lloyd, who worked there for 35 years as a medical records clerk. Her heart stopped on the job 15 years ago. She's grateful she received great care, but worries about repeated ER closures. And the owners of the Winnipeg Jets say they have never lost money on the team, not even during a recent downturn in ticket sales. Mark Chipman, Executive Chair of True North Sports and Entertainment, says all revenue streams available to the Jets have allowed them to turn a profit since 2011. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, and we're going to get to weather in a second. I just want to get through traffic here because we do have something to mention. St. Anne's approaching St. Mary's. There's a motor vehicle collision. It is blocking the northbound median lane. So keep right. Use caution if you're passing and expect some northbound delays. And please update us if you're having any issue out there, and be careful of all this cruise out street cleaning. They can't see you sometimes with their equipment, right? So pay attention to them and get around accordingly. And at a good speed. You probably need to slow down if you see the lineups of them. But they're getting that dust and dirt off the road. 788-3093 is the commute line, and Abby Adiemi has the forecast.
Yes, thanks, Mercy. Good morning once again. Winnipeg sits at 6 degrees with partly cloudy skies. We're headed to a high of 16 later today. Now, you need to watch out for showers later tonight and also tomorrow. Brandon is currently at 6 degrees. It's cloudy and would have a chance of showers later in the day. If we go up north, expect on Tuesday a mix-up of rain turning to snow by Wednesday, and an accumulation of about 30 to 50 millimeters in total. Still up north in Thompson, we are at 0. It's cloudy over there. Churchill's sunny but chilly at -14. Dauphin and Gimli both at 2 degrees at the moment and partly cloudy. Steinbeck is at 3 degrees with a chance of morning showers, and Morris is at 6 with also morning showers expected. But for Winnipeg, we are at 6 degrees, and we are seeing, the sun trying to poke out, but the cloudy conditions are already crawling in, and it's going to be a warmer 16 degrees later today. So I'll tell you, enjoy the day. See anything in traffic? Let us know.
Time right now is 8:14. Now, as with most surgeries, the recovery period is critical. And if you have had a knee replacement, that is especially true. And you likely know that because getting to physiotherapy in a timely manner can impact your ability to walk. My next guest says she was surprised when her physio sessions went from being covered by the Manitoba government to not being covered. Claudia Garcia de la Huerta is 50 years old. She'd been living with severe arthritis in both knees for 12 years. She had one knee replacement in 2022, and she had the other just this past February. And she's here now to share her story and what happened with the trajectory of her physio. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, too. After 2 knee replacement surgeries, after your first surgery, what was physio like?
Well, there was no issues. I was working. I was with the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra at the time. We had great benefits. I went on actually short-term disability because it's quite a long recovery period. I was off for 3 months. So all my physio, well, actually, I shouldn't say that. Not all my physio. I did still pay out of pocket for quite a bit, but I mean, the large extent of it was covered by our benefits, and then I even worked from home for a month before I went back to work full time. So it's painful. It's a very long process, and you start to look at physio as torture, but it's important. It's so important.
So before I ask you how physio went after this recent knee replacement, what do you understand about? I alluded a bit to this, but what do you understand about why it's particularly important in a knee replacement?
You have a very limited window where you can get that bend back in your knee after the surgery. When they do the actual surgery, the surgeon will bend your knee, like a rag doll, and usually it has the full amount. But once you're out of surgery, the muscle, like the operation itself, the surgery, you're stiff, you start to build up that scar tissue. So it's very stiff. And it is crucial that you get the maximum amount of bend in that knee in a short amount of time, because if you don't, that's it.
The recent knee replacement then in February that you had, your financial situation had changed. So how quickly did you get into physio and make that a priority?
Even before the surgery, I was already making the appointments, and they had let me know that this pilot program had been put in place by the last provincial government, and
for coverage,
which was fantastic because it didn't exist before. But by the time when I went to go to my first appointment, they said to me, "We're kind of in limbo because the program has ended and there's nothing happening. But thankfully, they decided, the new government, to extend it for a month, see what it was all about, and then make the decision of whether or not they were going to keep it. And I fit in that month. So I managed to get in 5 sessions. And
Now, we should explain to the listeners the program that came in under the PCs. You're correctly stating that then the NDP government extended it by that month, and the program covered 6 sessions privately or 10 group sessions. So you were getting in there in March thinking, I don't know what's going to happen after this month with the program. So if you had 5 sessions successfully covered.
Yeah.
What happened when you went for the 6th?
I went for the 6th, and when I went to leave, they said, hey, you owe money. We no longer have access to this program. They've canceled it. So I had to pay. And physio's not cheap. It's anywhere from $75 to $100 depending on where you go. Mine is $86. So I had to pay. And they had been desperately trying to get a hold of the province or whatever the program. They couldn't get through.
A lot of people have been trying to get a hold of the program. We have a call actually we're going to play here. This is a message. I was trying to seek some answers before our interview here. This was a message that I recorded on Friday.
Hello, you've reached Manitoba Physiotherapy Association. We're currently unavailable. If your call pertains to the provincial post-op funding program, please note that MPA has been advised that the hip-knee program will continue as usual and Manitoba Blue Cross will honor all clinic billings until further notice. MB Health will advise us once they have determined if and when this program will be ending.
So it's interesting language, right?
Mm-hmm.
If and when the program will be ending. So we did get a response from the government here. A provincial spokesperson did confirm, and this is exactly what they said to us, quote, Budget 2024, the one that just came out, provides provincial coverage of post-surgical hip and knee replacement physiotherapy, end quote. I'd also tried to get answers to how long it will be in place because it was an extension of a pilot. Also, when a decision will be made about the future of that coverage, and then if patients are covered for physio at all providers. So I did not get answers to that. I did get, though, that statement. So what's your reaction to the fact that they have confirmed that, coverage is there?
I'm thrilled. I think that's fantastic. These surgeries are so expensive. We all know about the lineup of people waiting. Without the physio, what's the point? You need that physio. It goes hand in hand with the surgery. It is crucial. So I'm elated. Just wish they'd be more communicative about how they're doing this and not leave people in limbo. But yay.
Why did you want to share your story, Claudia? Like, in part, obviously, it sheds a light, and we're seeking an update on what happened with this program. It's very important to so many. But who are you advocating for before having your own concerns to shine a light on what it's like for the folks that have this surgery?
Well, the majority of the people that have hip and knee surgery are elderly people who are on fixed incomes. And this, like I said, this is not cheap getting that physio, and you need it. You have to have it, or else there's no point in having the surgery. So to have a program like this is fantastic, and it's so, so important. So for all of those people, my fellow community of knee replacement and hip replacement people, I want them to have the best care and have the best outcome from these surgeries.
In terms of physio itself, does it matter to you as a patient whether or not it's, is 6 sessions enough for coverage, or should there be more? Do you have a thought on, if the program continues, should they amend it in any way?
Well, 6 sessions is not very much. My first knee replacement, because my other knee was really bad, I went to physio for 2 months, twice a week straight. This time around, because I have my good one bionic knee, I don't feel that I need as much. It's been a completely different process. So it depends on where you're at and what your age is and what your physical abilities are at the moment as to how much physio you're going to need.
And is it difficult to get into a provider? Because physio back in the day used to be more under the public system within house, and now it's outpatient more at different providers. So there's coverage there, but you have to go looking for someone to do your physio. Is that a concern for you as a patient, or is looking around and finding a doctor not an issue?
For physio, no. I think just because of the rise of athletic physio, like you can find physiotherapists everywhere in the city, and really good ones here in Winnipeg, I have to say. Yeah.
Anything to add, or any outstanding questions for the government? I mentioned mine that didn't get answered, but I'm not sure if you have some.
I'm so thankful that they are extending the program, but please communicate to the Physiotherapists Association,
As we heard,
communicate to the public, because this is a crucial program for people. So, let's get the word out there.
All the best with your continued recovery. Thank you for coming in. Yeah, nice to see you.
You too.
Claudia Garcia de la Huerta with us. She had both knees replaced and had been concerned about a government program ending covering physio. Now, as you heard, the government has not answered details about the program yet, but they did confirm, a provincial spokesperson said, Budget 2024 does have provincial coverage of post-surgical hip and knee replacement physiotherapy. End quote.
Hi, I'm Una Chaplin, and I'm the host of a new podcast called Hollywood Exiles. It tells the story of how my grandfather, Charlie Chaplin, and many others were caught up in a campaign to root out communism in Hollywood. It's a story of glamour and scandal and political intrigue and a battle for the soul of a nation.
Hollywood Exiles, available now on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
8:23 a.m. the time right now, 6 degrees the temperature, and today's high is going to be 16. So the special weather statement that's moving into the province affecting tomorrow impacts the Paw, Wanless, Westray, Clearwater Provincial Park, Flin Flon, Cranberry Portage, and Snow Lake, as well as Thompson, Nelson House, Split, Norway House, Cross, Roboden, Lynn Lake, Leaf, and Puck. So all those areas north going to get significant snow and rain tomorrow. It begins as rain, likely turns to snow. Over the next 3 days, we are talking about 30 to 50 millimeters of total precipitation. We need it, but just be aware that it's coming. In Winnipeg, it's going to mostly look like rain, and it's going to start, mainly cloudy tonight, and a really good chance we'll start seeing showers overnight. As mentioned, though, we're 6 degrees right now, heading for 16. So if you want to clean anything up before the rain comes, today's your pocket of time to be doing that, because then it's just going to get rainy and it's going to get a little bit cold as well. Well, Janet Stewart has popped into the studio. If you have been listening to Radio Noon, then you know that she is filling in for the next year, in fact, for Marjorie Dalhouse while she's on mat leave. And the program has introduced a call-in portion between 12:30 and 1 o'clock. And on Friday, the topic of discussion was building on the Premier, saying that he's going to be looking at a way forward to change the opening prayer at the Manitoba Legislature to become more inclusive. And I was listening, Janet, on Friday, and I just thought it was a really important, robust conversation, just perfect for the format to hear from all perspectives.
Well, that's the thing, is we want to hear from Manitobans. We want to hear different ideas. Is there a way that we can move forward together and make things better in our province, make everybody feel included? And today is really, I doubt we'll come up with any solutions that we can afford, because we're talking about our roads.
An infrastructure question. What's prompted this?
Oh, well, everything. The complaints that we're getting, the complaints that MPI is getting. We've reached out to MPI. We have a city councillor from Winnipeg, Janice Lukes from Waverly West. She's going to join us in the half hour. So at 12:30, the second half of Radio Noon, that's when we open our phone lines. And we just want to hear, what are the craters like where you're driving? What are you facing this spring? How does it rate in terms of other years? And do you have any suggestions or ideas? And so often it feels like all we need is, a ton of money, and we could fix it. We just don't have that ton of money. But in the meantime, it's something that we can talk about. Is there a way that we can reorganize things
and answer some questions? I think that's always the best part of call-ins too, because what happens on those, I often find that on the morning show, people will leave recorded questions, and I try to get back to them, but I can't always get back to everyone. And so the beauty of the call-in is, if somebody calls in and asks about, why can't we build our roads in a different way, you can sort of tackle that as you're working through it together in the conversation.
Absolutely. That's another thing. We're picking up the ball and running with it later in the day.
Yep.
So stay with us, please, Manitoba. And if you We'll open our phone lines at 12:30, but if you've got a thought on it now and before 12:30, you want to call in, call the listener line, 204-788-3797. We would love to hear from you.
788-3797. That's the noon listener line, everybody. Leave a message. As Janet just said, if you're listening now and you're thinking, my lunch hour is busy, but man, I'd like to tell you about the road, this is your opportunity, so leave a message.
Thanks, Marcy.
All right, thanks, Janet. Janet Stewart doing a great job, amazing a facilitator of a conversation, as is no surprise. And great to have you back on the radio airwaves. So this afternoon, how bumpy are the roads you're traveling this spring? That's the call-in between 12:30 and 1. Time right now is 8:26. And speaking of the roadways, we have a bit of a traffic update. St. Anne's approaching St. Mary's. Motor vehicle collision's been cleared now, so there's an update. All lanes are open, so the delays have cleared as well. There's also a teacher called us, retired teacher rather, eastbound Bishop Grandin. It's Abinogi-Mackinac, pardon me. That's what I should be saying, Abinogi-Mackinac. This is on the Fort Garry Bridge. It's very slow. It's down to one lane. So on the Fort Garry Bridge, very slow down to one lane. Thank you so much for calling. And I haven't, apparently there was a typo. This is not the retired teacher that called. This is just the tired teacher that called. Yep. It's Monday, 788-3093 if you want to reach us. Now, I have just a few minutes before the news at 8:30, and I want to go through something special that might result in you winning a prize. So there is so much comfort to be found by curling up with a good book. And maybe you found yourself doing that over the weekend with the sunshine streaming in the windows. And many people have discovered that reading can have a lasting impact. It's so important. Next week, April 23rd, is World Book Day. And we have a special contest. We're asking you to tell us about a book that you read that has inspired, informed, or entertained you. So we have 2 bundles of books that we're going to be able to give away. They're courtesy of Share the Magic Book Program. It's a not-for-profit organization, and each and every year we're thrilled that they partner with us and they offer some books that we can give away. They collect new and gently used books. They distribute them throughout disadvantaged communities all over the province. One of the bundles this year features Manitoba and Canadian authors. Very cool. The other bundle is a perfect score for playoff season. It's a collection of books about hockey. So tell us about that special book that you've read and let us know which book bundle you're hoping to win. So is it the Manitoba Canadian authors or is it the sports books? Email us, win@cbc.ca. And there are 2 ways to enter here, win@cbc.ca by email, or you can call us at 204-788-3205. That's the morning show listener line. We will share your entries across all our local shows all week long.
Have you visited CBC's Being Black in Canada website? It's an online platform to explore the stories and experiences of Black Canadians from across the country. You'll find relevant news articles and interviews, incredible documentaries and interesting video clips, Black achievement in sports, art and culture recommendations, and so much more. Discover the wide breadth of CBC content celebrating Black Canadians all in one place. Visit cbc.ca/beingbblackincanada today.
It is coming up to news time at 8:30, and as mentioned, we've got a partly cloudy sky downtown. I'm Marcy Marcusa. You're with Information Radio here with our team at the show on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. And I want to mention something that is coming up tomorrow. This is the federal budget. That's not what I want to mention. You can figure that out on your own. But I do want to say that we are going to have a special on tomorrow. So CBC News will run a national special on federal budget 2024. Complete coverage of the tabling of the budget. Chief Political Correspondent Rosemary Barton will host from the foyer of the House of Commons. Winnipeg time, it begins at 3 o'clock. So what does that tell you? It tells you that Up to Speed and Faithful in Dallas program will be preempted in part by this federal special, and then we'll build out the back with local reaction. So tomorrow at 3 o'clock, the federal budget special, and you can catch it on all of our platforms, including here on the radio on 89.3. Right now, it's time for your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 8:30. It's 6 degrees right now. We're headed to 16 today. Get out and enjoy it because starting tomorrow, we take a turn colder and wet for the next few days. The owners of the Winnipeg Jets say they have never lost money on the team, not even during a recent downturn in ticket sales. CBC's Bartley Kivas reports.
The Winnipeg Jets are successful on the ice, but ticket sales have been soft this year. In February, when Jets co-owner Mark Chipman told The Athletic those low sales are unsustainable, he prompted speculation about the NHL's future in Winnipeg. In an interview with CBC News, Chipman says his company, True North Sports and Entertainment, has never lost money since the NHL returned, given all its revenue streams.
From an overall perspective, no, we've never lost money in our NHL years.
Previous years we did.
Chipman also says True North has never distributed profits from the Jets. He says profits have been reinvested into their arena.
We don't look at it like your garden variety business. You've probably heard us use the word stewards or trustees. Like, we own it because somebody has to own it, but it doesn't really belong to us.
Chipman says True North has spent $83 million on upgrades to Canada Life Centre since the arena was built 20 years ago for $134 million. Bartley Kivas, CBC News, Winnipeg.
You can read more about the economics of operating an NHL franchise in the league's smallest market. Just head to our website. New safety officers start patrolling the Health Sciences Centre this morning. The officers are trained on de-escalation techniques and use of force, among other things. Last week, an arbitrator gave Shared Health 30 days to create a safety plan after finding an unacceptable risk to hospital workers going to and from the HSC. The province says institutional safety officers at Manitoba's largest hospital will have access to the right tools, including pepper gel. It adds more training classes for new institutional officers are planned over the next 3 months. People in Ericsdale worry they may die waiting for a new emergency room. CBC obtained data suggesting E.M. Crow Hospital's ER was closed more than it was open last year. 67-year-old Dale Lloyd worked there for 35 years as a medical records clerk. Her heart stopped on the job 15 years ago. Nurses saved her life. She's grateful for the care she received, but worries about these repeated closures at the ER.
I've told my partner if Ericsdale's not on call and I have a heart attack, you head south, and if you make it to Stonewall and I survive, great.
Staff at E.M. Crow Hospital say they are overworked amid staffing shortages. The NDP has pledged to build a new ER in Ericsdale in the coming years. A new report on opioid deaths shows an almost 5-time increase in overdose deaths in Manitoba between 2019 and 2021. The Canadian Medical Association Journal report looks at opioid deaths right across the country. The deaths more than doubled in that time. It found Manitoba had the greatest increase in opioid deaths in the 3-year period of the study. Overall, Alberta had the highest number of deaths, followed by Saskatchewan. Manitoba is third. The study found the highest number of people who died from an opioid overdose were men in their 30s. Well, world leaders are urging Israel not to retaliate after Iran launched a weekend attack involving more than 320 drones, ballistic missiles, and cruise missiles. The Winnipeg Jewish Federation says it is standing in solidarity with Israel after that attack. The Federation CEO, Jeff Lieberman, worries things are only going to get worse.
People are fearful for their friends and relatives' lives. The hope is that this won't escalate into anything more than that. Cooler heads will prevail, and that the two sides will stand down.
Lieberman says if no one wants a war, Israel has the right to defend itself, even if no one wants a war. Ariane Arianpour at the Iranian community of Manitoba says members of the community are worried about family and friends still living in Iran. And he says the regime must be stopped if there's ever going to be peace in the Middle East. If you live in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, or Ontario, or one of the 4 Atlantic provinces, and filed your taxes, you will be getting the first of 4 federal government carbon rebate checks starting today. Those payments are based on a household size. And it is almost game on at the Sargent Park tennis courts. Starting this year, people get to play for free without paying. Ronnie Guevara has played tennis there for decades. He says the city's decision to take back control of the courts will attract more players.
The camaraderie there is really great. We have a good community there. We play anytime we want without any restrictions, so that's a big deal for us.
A City of Winnipeg committee recently voted not to renew the lease of the nonprofit that ran those courts for 10 years. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you to our team, Heather Wells and Megan Ketcherson, Joni Nicolo. Also to our team here, Abby Adeyemi, May McKillop, and Brad Lillies. Speaking of Abby, he's back in with a forecast.
Yep, currently we are at 6. We're warming up to a cozy 16. 16. And don't forget, the clouds are rolling in, and also watch out for showers tonight and tomorrow across the province. Brandon may see some showers heading to a high of 16. Thompson, cloudy, heading to a high of 9. Churchill is chilly at heading to a high of 0. Dauphin and Gimli both heading to 13 and 14 respectively. And Steinbach Morris will be seeing 16 degrees.
All right, thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
Thanks to our hardworking team of associate producers who work day, night, round-the-clock weekend to get everything covered, and we appreciate you as well. Thanks to our leaders in unit, Leif Larson and Nellie Gonzalez. I'm Marcy Marcusa, and thank you for listening. That's Monday, folks. We'll talk to you again tomorrow morning right here on Information Radio. It is Federal Budget Day, and if you want to weigh in as a Manitoban about what you're hoping to see in this, you know what I'm going to say. Give us a call, 788-3205. The Current is coming up next.